This episode is presented by TurboSuite, the next generation revenue management solution for serious hospitality providers. I'm joined by Leo Walton, co-founder of Superhog. Leo, my man, thanks for joining Journeys.
Thanks for having me on, Flo. Fantastic to see you, my friend. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. Now, let's jump right into it. Earliest memory of your career, what you wanted to be when you were a kid?
Great. I mean, always happy to take a step, or a giant leap back to my childhood. That leap's just getting longer and longer, isn't it? The more time goes. So, yeah. If I think back, I think I was probably similar to most kids living in the northwest of England at the time. Currency was football. There's lots of clubs in the area, die-hard supporters, and my family, and we were no different. We were die-hard, still are, Manchester United supporters. And my, belief at a very young age was that I would obviously grow up to be in the starting 11 for Man United.
Yeah, I shared that dream, not for Man United. For me, it was Bayern Munich, but yeah, I grew up playing football, and it was just obvious. We had, when we were kids, we filled out like these little diaries for friends where you kind of, my favorite food, my favorite movie, what you want to be when you grow up, and it was always football professional, completely unaware of what that actually means.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because obviously, the wider Munich area has that obsession with football the same way we do in the northwest of England. And we were really easy kids, I think, because you just had to give us a ball and let us play around in the garden, and we were really, really happy. I think it's a little bit more complicated now for kids, computer games, trying to get them outdoors, all that stuff. We really didn't have that. We just wanted to play. I think it was just my parents had to kind of limit how much we'd want to go and play out, given how much it rains in the northwest of England. But apart from that, we were fairly easy kids. And what stayed with me as I've got older is the love of exercise and fitness, team sport. And you know me well enough, Flo, to know that I'm definitely the sort of guy who might sneak home from a party early if it means I can get up early and go for a jog in the morning. That kind of love for exercise and training has always stayed with me. Clearly, as you know, I didn't make it with Man United, but the passion for training and sport has never died. That's great, because for most people it's the passion of sitting on the couch and watching football. That's where it's changed into. Ten Hag didn't put you in the starting 11. All travelled just from the spectator perspective. What's a trait that you learned? What was your first paycheck? Yeah, so again, being from the northwest of England, it was quite common for people to start working while they were still at school, to do weekend jobs and fund your own social life. I think it's probably primarily because Northerners, and I can say this because I'm a Northerner, Northerners are quite cheap. So our parents were never going to give us handouts so we could go on nice holidays and do nice things with our friends. So from the age of, I want to say 13, I worked in restaurants. Clearly when I was 13, I started just washing pots, progressed very quickly to waiting tables. So what that experience taught me was the beauty of earning your own pound, right? Putting that pound in your pocket, being on your feet and doing something. So my first paychecks were actually really quite good, because friends and peers of mine would be maybe having shop jobs or paper rounds, things like that only paid you a fixed hourly.
Sure.
Whereas what we were doing was we worked in a really, really good seafood pub, and it was me and my brother. Me and my brother basically worked out that if we spent all our time on the restaurant floor trying to charm these kind of middle-aged customers and slightly getting the food orders wrong, but hopefully chatting to them the whole time, I guess out of sympathy more than anything, they would actually tip us quite well. And that opened up my horizon. So I think when I was a 13, 14-year-old, I was rolling in it. I was earning way more than my friends, probably by a factor of 4 or 5, because I very quickly learned that your hourly wage at our age wasn't the thing that was going to be interesting. It was the ability to make tips, and so forged in me and my brother, who if you ever meet Flo, you'll just be like, oh my god, there's 2 of them. This idea that you need to be able to communicate and chat to people to get things done and get what you need out of them.
I can see when you work with a restaurant, you very quickly realize the mechanics of if I treat them well, if I'm a little bit charming, and if I participate in them having a good evening, then I'll profit from it at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's it. And I think that it works really well because clearly it was a family-run restaurant. There's still kind of people that, you know, if I saw them on the street, we'd hug now because the owners, even though they were sort of 30 years older than us probably, but it was a very, very, very special time. And what worked well for them was the fact that by building up the rapport with these customers, yes, they were coming back, but also they're probably ordering more, staying for dessert, staying for coffee, so the bills are bigger, right? And then it's kind of self-fulfilling. So I agree with you. You learn kind of how to manage a relationship, and then you send that relationship out the door knowing that they'll come back in the week after. And in a restaurant, you're turning tables, you're doing that like, you know, 100 covers a night, 2 or 3 nights a week. So it's a very rapid learning that you make. And I think that we were at such an impressionable age, our brains were at such an impressionable age, that I think it really did instill into our psyche this idea of how you communicate, how you make people feel relaxed. And I've always been a believer in the very, very well said thing. You know, I'm not inventing anything here by saying this, but it's not really it's not what you say to people, it's how you make them feel. No one remembers what you say, but everyone remembers how you made them feel. And that was the whole game there. And I think I probably learned more from that experience than anything I ever learned in formal education to help me now.
Yeah, I remember one of the very first sales trainings that I got at a software company where one of the phrases was "people buy people first," and
right.
That really stuck with me. But you don't wait tables anymore, I've heard, so you must have moved on somehow.
Yeah, well, some days I think I'll go back to it. I really do. When I'm older and I'm ready to take it a bit slower, I'll buy a place and I'll do it. I'll probably be awful at it, right? I'll be like, this now needs to be done, and then I'll be completely useless. But in many ways, it was just such a fun and interesting way of doing business. It made me think about what my career would be in a totally different way to a lot of my friends that never worked as kids. Because, you know, clearly I went to university, and then you start mixing with people that have never had to work in their lives, and they're just focused on the grad job, the grad scheme, going corporate, finance, big paychecks. And I think I knew that I wanted to have a job which allowed me to be inquisitive and sort of be the master of my own destiny. So I knew that. I'd already worked out that I wanted to be, I guess that always is naturally going to lead you towards sales and business development and commercial sort of things. But I knew that. I knew I wasn't someone that could sit within a process and just take a paycheck. So that inspired me to take the first role I took, which was at the time a very small, fast-growing but very unknown company called One Fine Stay. And I answered the ad to build and create a check-in process and team for them. So my first job for them was cycling around London in the pouring rain, in a high-vis jacket, and arriving at people's properties 45 minutes before the guest was due, ready to welcome them into the home. And when I started, I was, the only one doing that job. And then by the time I moved on from that particular role in One Fine Stay, I built a team of 20 people, actors, musicians, freelancers, people that wanted to do that role full time to fund their other lifestyle. And it was amazing because it introduced me to this concept of tech-enabled home sharing. Now, my experience of home sharing had been family holidays to Devon and Spain and things like that, but I'd never seen it done in London. And it was eye-opening. And I was in this environment where everything was up for grabs. It was all about how hard you were willing to work. Yeah. So, if you had ideas, you wanted to implement them, and you wanted to grow a team and a strategy in this way, you were given the freedom to do that. That is the biggest compliment I could give One Fine Stay, is that it allowed people to run with their idea. If they had them, go with them. And I loved it, because again, it just felt reminiscent to when I was a waiter, and I felt like I could be the master of my own destiny, because the tips would be the thing that, made it interesting for me. Suddenly it became about the learning, the fact that I was building something, I was using different parts of my brain. And I found that very inspiring. But not too long after that, I joined the commercial function and moved more directly into business development and supply acquisition, originally for the London market. And then by the time I left that business post-Accor acquisition, I was running that team in Europe. But that was an amazing 7 years for me, because it allowed me to, as I say, excel in that environment where you were being encouraged to try things. And for me, that was like light bulbs going off. Loved it.
So let me get this straight. You got into short-term rentals fairly early. That was your first job?
Yeah, when I left university, I was still working. I was still waiting tables because I had to pay my way for university as well. So
yeah.
that was in London. I was working at the time for...
What did you do in uni?
International development.
International development. What does that mean? It's,
I guess, international politics, third world economics, NGO management, all of that type of, what's happening at the UN versus what's happening at Oxfam. How does that structural adjustment loans in the third world and how they affected economic policy in the 80s, things like that, kind of why the world is the way it is today.
Okay. Is that helping you at all with what you're doing today? No. Okay. Which I think it's fascinating because everyone who's kind of younger generation who are trying to figure out what they're supposed to be and what they want to study, I think it's just do what you feel like at that moment and don't think too much about later because the world is changing and opportunities appear. And okay, interesting.
Yeah, so I think you're right, Flo, and I think that so my view on it is that university is slightly an indulgence for those that would like to learn more around a topic for 3 years.
Yeah.
Maybe include some travel in it. So I'd be recommending my daughter to think about doing languages because then you go and live somewhere abroad for a year and there's a lot of learning. But academic higher education is an indulgence. Really, we should be having more people doing an apprenticeship.
Yeah.
You should have more people doing apprenticeships, and there's a really great movement of that going on in the UK at the moment. It's something we do at Superhog. Take on talented people who don't want to go to university, don't want to waste the money, don't want to get into debt, and just teach them the basics and the mechanics of doing business. And by the time they get to 21, 22, when they traditionally be leaving university, they are so much more ready for business life by probably a factor of 10. But it doesn't mean I regret university because, as I say, it was a phenomenal experience and I really loved reading around the subject. And again, all of the time you're growing up, you're getting older, you're getting more worldly and hopefully slightly wiser. And it was in one of my lectures that a lecturer said to us, look, 90% of you around this room at some point in your career will end up working for a company today that doesn't exist today.
Yeah, exactly.
They said 50% of you will end up working in an industry that doesn't exist today.
Yeah.
And I was like, that can't be right. The world's the way it is. It's set in stone. And that was certainly on my mind when I started looking for graduate roles. But as I say, I naturally defaulted to go back to working at restaurants and before doing that because I loved working on my feet. So I wasn't the sort of person who was rushing into grad schemes and just trying to find a first job. I was like, do you know what? I'll graduate and I know I can wait tables until I find that right opportunity. Yeah. And that allowed me to then take a slightly different approach and think, okay, I'll take a risk on this company called One Fine Stay. Lots of my peers at the time were going for much more stable, probably slightly higher paid grad schemes because they wanted that stability. But for me, I was interested in the project, and what I loved about One Fine Stay was we actually did it, right? We built it, we grew it, we sold it, like that whole journey, sold it to a hotel industry, a hotel chain. It was an amazing journey, and I learned so much in 7 years because I went cradle to grave with that whole journey, and I just would never have got that experience somewhere else.
Just quickly, one step back, what you mentioned about the kind of education in Germany, there's kind of this dual education system where half of the week you spend in a company and the other half you go to business school. And I think that's kind of a brilliant way because when you come out of school, you go into uni and then you do your apprenticeships and stuff like this. But I think it's such a great way of learning what it means to do a job and to work a job and learn at the same time. And then also the chance to realize that the career path you're choosing isn't what you want to be. And the other thing I really enjoy what you just talked about, this cradle to grave, when you get the chance to be kind of early in a project and you spend the energy and you have the will to spend extra time and extra energy, and then given this freedom to grow, I think it binds you to the employer.
Yeah.
If you're given this kind of, at DNA when I was there was kind of also the vibe at the early stage where, well, people should take decisions, and then we know if people take decisions, then you will make some mistakes that comes with it, but that also gives you the opportunity to grow and kind of lead, and management is kind of can focus on other stuff.
That's right, and I think that having a culture where mistakes are actually encouraged, and what's discouraged is not learning from them or not course correcting quickly enough. That's the mistake, and I think that give people enough freedom to put those projects forward, and you'll find out what they're most brilliant at. And part of the responsibility of any business that employs young people starting out in their careers, people developing, and I take this fully on board with Superhog, is to find the thing that they're better at than anyone else are doing. Because everybody has things that they are the best at doing. And if you can unlock that within your organization, and that's only through repeatedly like trying things that don't work, throwing them out, going again. And that's kind of it was constantly in the back of my mind when I'm thinking about our teams is, am I giving them, and are we as the leadership giving them enough space to suggest things and execute the things that they think are the right thing? Because there's nothing worse than getting a group of smart people in the room and not letting them express themselves.
Yeah, it's like this famous thing they posted every 2 months on LinkedIn. You shouldn't hire smart people and tell them what to do. You should hire smart people so they can tell you what you're supposed to do. And I'm not entirely sure that many companies work like that. One Fine Day got sold. What did that do to your career?
Well, it actually initially enhanced it, because I was then in Paris once a month for a few days, sort of helping with the transition. Because what happened next was One Fine Day was bought, and then it was merged with 2 other businesses. And I spent the next, I think it was probably 18 months trying to help with that 3-way merger. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the challenge of it, be it working in a more corporate environment, how you got things done, how you navigated that. And then it meant that the One Fine Day brand had more cachet because it had done the journey, right? It had done the full cycle. So it was a great thing. I think the growth we got from a supply side that I was involved in helped get the acquisition, and then the work I did post acquisition certainly helped me learn more skills. But also, I think probably led me to the conclusion that was always obvious, that I needed to go back and be very early stages again in a new project. And as good fortune would have it, not mentioned earlier in this interview, but certainly could have been, was that alongside me at One Fine Day, when I started in the commercial function, was Humphrey. And between us, we kind of carved up the leads and signed every home in London for a couple of years as a bit of a dynamic duo, and had a very good time. We were quite young and we were living in London. It was a very exciting time as well. So it was a lot of fun, and I think that in both of us kind of built a really nice kinship and a really nice friendship. And Humphrey told me what his idea was and asked me if I wanted to jump over and help build Superhog. And the answer was obviously 1,000 times yes. And I think what we'd been preparing ourselves for without knowing it is that we'd been building a knowledge of what hosts' fears were about short-term rental through the role that we would do, which for me was latterly managing a team of people across Europe trying to get supply on board, so get people to give the keys to their house. So that gave me a really acute idea, acute knowledge of what the risk management fears were, and then we could start building products to hopefully get
just quickly in 3 sentences, for if there's anyone out there who doesn't know what Superhog does, to get us on the same page.
Superhog's your risk management toolkit. Whether you're a property manager, property owner, or host, we can screen your guests, doing background screening on their names, emails, phone numbers. We can also ID screen, and then we do financial products. So we provide a $5 million guarantee against property damage to any verified booking where the guest has gone through our screening. And we also can do damage waiver and damage deposit remittance. So we'll pay so you waive the liability for the guest, the first $500, or we can hold a damage deposit for you. So we basically take care of your check-in with a real focus on risk management. And everybody, big or small, one property host to big 5,000 listings PMC mammoth, needs to have a risk management strategy, and we're here to help you with yours.
And you're a multinational company now. You opened an office in my hometown, Barcelona, and I know Humphrey is eyeing the US as a possible future home.
Certainly growth for us in the US has been fascinating, and there's a real appetite for the product there. And then Europe, the Mediterranean, tourist towns. It's huge. And when you start a business in the UK, in the short-term rental sector, the ceiling happens quite quickly, that you've maybe spoken to everyone. So you either work with everyone, or there's a reason why you're not working with a particular person. So we quite early on in our growth, a few years back, looked heavily at looked with some real focus at how we should do expansion. And I think that really does help you as a business, because with US companies, it often works that you've got such a large market to work with that you just focus on that for an awful long time. Whereas for us, quite quickly, the view was always that we needed to make it an international product. So we have clients in South Africa, clients in Australia, Europe, and North America, and Latin America.
So, apart from you not playing for Manchester United, so far your life does sound like a success story. But I know it's not always that linear. What did you feel were some challenges or proper road bumps in your past, 75 years?
Yeah. So charming, aren't you? Yes. I think I'm very geared towards being people focused, and I think the challenge for me has always been how you make sure that you're still setting up a room so that you're asking the most from people. To go back a stage, don't get smart people in the room and then give them very, very small jobs and don't expect too much from them. But as a people person, your natural inclination is to always want to be cordial and cohesive and bring people together. And actually, you have to allow for that conflict to challenge people to say, well, why doesn't this work as well as it could do? How do you make it better? And that's certainly something that I really struggled with in the early part of my career. So I was managing a team at one point, quite early on, and I became very close with that group, and we were out a lot and drinking a lot and things like that, and the lines blur quite a lot. And I think possibly career-wise, that's certainly been the challenge, is just trying to remember that the end goal is growth and successful business. It's not friendship. So you have to try and again, for the good of them as well, as members of the team, they need to grow, they need to develop. So I think that's something I've just had to learn as I've gone. And I would say what's come for me as I've got older and become a dad and settled down is maybe a little bit more calmness and stillness, and the ability to take a step back and do that, and not always be, I need to be everybody's best friend, and I need to be out and about with them, and on the scene with them. And that's something I wasn't very good at first. And again, I'm a work in progress, but I think that calmness and stillness is something that I've really enjoyed, that I seem to have found as I've hit a bit of an older age.
There are some benefits to getting older, aren't there?
There are, I mean, I don't want you and me to sound washed up when I say this, but, it is true. It just helps you take a slight step back. And again, it's, with the fullness of time, you understand a bit more, don't you?
When you've fallen down or ran into a wall several times, at some point, you do realize kind of how to deal with it. If the wall, or how to bypass it, or just recognize that, well, that happens once in a while.
And it helps you. I think also for me, it's helped me take things less personally as well. Yeah. So and that's a family. That's for sure a family trait, because we're very empathetic as a bunch, and we love people. We love social interactions. But it's the idea that it's box it away as this is your personal life, this is your downtime, this is your family, this is what really matters, and then this is the professional context. So we should be open to criticism. We should be able to spar. We should be dueling. And if we're not, then we're going to lose the race to our rivals, because we're not crunching through things and having those real conversations with one another. And, I'm going to say that I think now I'm quite good at it. I think I am now quite good at it, but it's taken me a lot longer to learn that. And then I think the thing that I'm good at, which some senior people in other businesses aren't as good at, is I'm also very, very happy when my team tell me that I'm wrong, because only then are we actually doing that collective brain thing where they're like, no, Leo, you're completely wrong. That won't work. This is what we think will happen. And you have to allow yourself to be really vulnerable for someone to tell you you're wrong. So, and that's my message to anyone is try and work on that because it's so good if you can get there.
I think that's a magical skill. On the one side, the old school manager who's asked how high, to a more modern approach where you get the mix right between leadership and opening up we're a team. Obviously, several brains are smarter than just one, and without losing authority to the point where, guys, what are we supposed to do today? And there's obviously kind of a gap in between that you seem to be hitting quite well. So let's take a step into the future. Superhog keeps being super successful. You keep growing. You're even more international than you are today. What's a potential future for Leo Walton?
It's a really interesting question. I mean, I think I said it, didn't I?
The restaurant. I think there might be one step before, and then you open up the restaurant where you are your own best guest, potentially.
Until I fail spectacularly in the restaurant game. I think the more time you spend working, the more you realise what you enjoy and what you don't enjoy, right? So, and you've always said this yourself. It's not your career is squiggly, right? You know, it's you start in a certain role and then you're like, oh great, you know what? I really enjoy the business development part of this. I'm going to do more of that and less of I'm going to create a process and an ops business, etc. So you kind of lean into the things that you enjoy doing, and I think that in so becoming more senior in businesses as I've got older, it actually allows you to get exposure to and have a view on things that you're not particularly good at. And I find that really, really interesting. Now, clearly you're not the doer, but you get to sit in these things and above these things and kind of have an opinion on them. So for me, I hope that there's just more, whatever happens next, whatever, whether it's Superhog till I'm 65 or whether there's another business that comes after this, I just continue to be able to learn and be inquisitive about what we're trying to build, because that is where I'm happiest, is when we're asking questions and working things out and crunching through problems. So, I don't want to be siloed off and just doing the things I know I'm really good at. I want to be able to do those things, but also have a view, be witness to the amazing things that are happening across the business. And that's, I think, probably the thing I enjoy most about where I'm at the moment in my career.
I think those are some beautiful final words, unless you tell me otherwise and we haven't touched on something important on your journey.
I don't think you asked me what position I thought I'd played for Manchester United.
Oh, let's touch on that. Typically it's striker or goalie. What would you have played?
Do you know what? Straight up, left wing. I was left-footed. I wanted to play down the left wing, but I'd have taken left back just to get in the 11.
Okay. For many years Giggs was left wing?
Ryan Giggs.
Ryan Giggs. He stole your spot. Are you a similar age? Are you a little bit younger, no?
I think he's probably 10 years on me. So thanks for thinking we're the same age. He has got more hair and a lot more money. But yeah, there you go.
But he's very different in regards to his character. I've heard he doesn't seem to be such a nice person. Yeah. But that's a different story.
I'm happy where I am. For sure.
Very good. Then let those be the final words. Leo, thanks so much for joining. Leo Walton, the co-founder of Superhog. Well, I'll see you soon, my friend.
Thank you.